Welcome. So we'll be having a short um, period today because of a couple of other calls available to join, but we'll need to round off on the module we almost concluded during the last session, and that is still on module 4, and the last part of it is talking about pivot tables in Excel. So we'll see how we can move around that in a few minutes today, and we can, by next session, commence with Module 5, which is dedicated to the use of statistics. So, as we said before, this discussion around data is essentially for people who want to break into data, people who are managing people, or people whose work is directly or indirectly involved with data, and they want to independently build capacity to make sense of the data they have been faced with every now and then. So during the last session, we were able to get up to this point where we were trying to see how to break a single column into uh, smaller columns just to ease analysis and to ease our evaluation of the entire data set. So aside the fact that we manually created a formula for doing that, so as at last session, we were able to use an inbuilt function in Excel, which is concatenation. So we use concatenation to uh, merge two columns together to become one. And we could also go ahead and break the same column into two or more columns, depending on how many things or how many elements are originally included in that particular column. So those are part of the things an analyst is expected to spot out in the course of dealing with any data to see if there is a particular column in the data set that will necessarily, that is necessarily having more than enough information, and it may not be easy to analyze when or if such column is not further broken down into into two or three or more columns, depending on how many things were merged into it in the first place. So those were the things we dealt with, and we could also see how we can make use of the function called left, right, and mid while doing the whole of the concatenation and extracting information from that data set. So moving ahead, we will do, we will, by today, we'll move ahead on pivot tables and see how we can create pivot tables and how we can work around pivot tables. Then also I'll evaluate some stuffs about pivot table. But before we do that, just a quick background information on what pivot table is originally created or designed to achieve for data analysts by the people who created that application called Excel. So primarily the word pivot table came about just to um, bring into consciousness the fact that when you have a table, in this case a data set, uh, the entire data set, whether it is uh, quite a huge data or a smaller one, it is not easy at a glance to quickly see some trend or pattern in that particular data. And you may not be, it may not be also quickly possible to derive some insight out of that data. So the best way to figure out what kind of trend that particular data set is talking about or is giving out is to find a way of categorizing some stuffs in the data set, or finding a way to summarize the different information that are not immediately appearing on data set. So what pivot table is meant to achieve is to help summarize a data set, categorize them in such a form that you can easily make some conclusion or derive or extract some information from that data even before going into full analysis. So pivot table helps one to quickly subdivide, summarize, evaluate a huge data set and see different categorization that is embedded in the data set, but were not obviously open at first glance. So that's exactly what pivot table is meant to do. And now, how do we put that into practice? For instance, say we have the usual data sets we've been working on. If we have this particular data set, for instance, we could see that a lot of information are here. We could see there is an information talking about revenue, information talking about costs, information talking about profits and what have you. And some other parts of it is also revealing some very important information about how the data set came to be, the origin, and the different other attributes and characteristics the data is having that can give more meaningful insight into the whole essence of the data itself. So while looking at it this way, all of those things are hard to make conclusion over, but if I subject this entire data set to pivot table feature, I can quickly or easily see some things that are not going to be possible for me to see while viewing the entire data set this way. So pivot table will help summarize all of these things. Okay, I can see countries. So how many sales or bike sales can I say from this data that one of this country is having, say for instance Australia, or say for instance Canada? That is very difficult to see or know at a glance, even though I know that there are quite a number of countries in here, but I cannot quickly figure out how many of those sales come from a particular country or comes from a particular state in one of the countries. So those are things that the pivot table will help us bring into consciousness. For instance, too, I cannot categorically say which of this age group falls within a particular country, or which of this age group does a particular country not have any sales in at all. Those are very critical information, because if I know the kind of age group that are actually pushing or driving sales in a particular country, then that gives insight as to what age bracket are actually loving this particular product. Then you start thinking with the marketing team further, how well can we do more advert for this kind of age group for them to get this information more, because it shows that that age brackets are purchasing these things. So how do we uh, drive home our adverts into more of that particular market segment, so that I can get more sales from them? All of those things cannot be easily gotten while looking at the entire data, and that is the essence of having um, what is it called, the pivot table. So for the pivot table, as I am having this for some versions of Excel that are not necessarily Excel from Microsoft 365, you may take more than a couple of steps before you could get the same thing that I may be getting right away from Excel 365, but nonetheless, you still get the same result anyways. So what do I want to do here? If I go ahead to say that I have these data sets, I want to sub categorize it, so I want to subdivide it, or I want to bring out some summaries of the information right on this thing without having going into full analysis. So as an analyst, so what I do is just to go ahead and pick insert on my ribbon right here. As soon as I pick insert, you see a sub-menu changes, which are entirely for insert. Each of the menu item right here on the ribbon have their sub-menu. So depending on which of them you click, it will determine which sub-menu will appear. So on clicking insert right here, I have all of these sub-menu. And can see straight away what I want is pivot table I want to create. So I can go ahead here and click on this pivot table, but just for somebody just freshly beginning with pivot table, you can also take advantage of this recommended pivot table. So this recommended pivot table is more like an offer to people who are new to the use of pivot table, and it's just for you to have a quick guide on what kind of summaries pivot table gives normally. So if I click on it now, it gives me this. So Excel has intelligently gone inside these data sets and it has subdivided or subcategorized the entire data set into all of these things I'm having here. Number one, Excel has created a sub table from this main table called the sum of profit by age. So it's giving me profit by age. It's also giving me revenue by age. It's also giving me the customers by age. It's also giving me what's sample here now, unit price. So I can click each of them. By the time you click each of them, then on your right side, it will display to you what exactly that table is about. So this one is sum of profit by age. Second one is sum of revenue by age. Third one is sum of customer age, sum of cost, and all that. Then if you click the next one, sum of day by customer, gender. This one is sum of unit price by unit cost. And this one is sum of unit costs by unit price. So these are samples Excel has intelligently brought out to me that, okay, I can subdivide this whole data set into all of these just to get some insight. So let me begin with the first one, which says sum of profit by age. So if I select it this way, then I can come here to pick OK. Then automatically Excel create a new sheet and put that new pivot table I just created and put it there, which is just this. So for clarity, automatically when the new sheet opens this way, on your right hand side is what we call pivot table fields. This is where the breakdown of the pivot table you are seeing on your left. So on this left, this table you see on this left, where I'm rovering my cursor, is the pivot table. Then on the right is the breakdown of how Excel has arrived on this pivot table on the left. So I can see on my right here that, okay, Excel has picked one column called age group column, and it has put it in the pivot table. And that age group is what we are seeing here: adults, young adults, youth, and what have you. That's age group. I can also scroll further down. I can also see that, okay, Excel has equally picked profit to be inside this pivot table, and I can see it's sum of profit. This is the profit. So I think that's all. Those are the two things Excel has picked so far for this pivot table. And that was just automatic because it was a sample recommendation for pivot table. So you can tweak around it. You can unselect some things. You can say, okay, I don't want age group. Don't give me age group. Then you just come here and uncheck this age group. Automatically, you see that the age group will disappear on your left in the pivot table because on the field, you have adjusted it, you have removed it. So that's how flexible it is. So if I uncheck this age group, it will disappear. Can you see? But if I check it again, it goes back there. Can you see? And that is there. So I can go ahead and remove anyone I don't want. I can go ahead and include anyone I want. Do not forget, Excel intelligently check through this data set and use the table headers to form columns on the field. Then it's picking those column one by one, depending on what kind of analysis you want to do and what kind of things you want to see in that new table you want to summarize. So that's exactly what it does. So when I go back there now, so I still have this. So I can say, okay, which other column can I bring up for me to see a couple of things? Okay, let me see some quantity. How many quantity is making me this kind of profits? Okay, I can check this other quantity right here. You can see it appears on the left straight away. So I also have that field ably represented here. I can equally go ahead and say, okay, now that I want to know the profit, I can easily figure out profit by age because I have the age breakdown on the same table. Good. I equally have the quantity that is making the profit for me. Fine, equally. Then, what else do I want to get out of this? Okay, if I have the quantity of the product that is fetching me the kind of profit and it is being divided by age bracket or age categorization, do I also want to know at what location are these quantity coming from? In this case, meaning from which country? Because we could see in that main table that there were a lot of countries that the sales are made from. Can you see? You can see United States, you can see United Kingdom, you can see Australia, Germany, Canada, and what have you. So while trying to figure out profit now, I must know what sort of quantity is fetching me those profits. Then I need to know where exactly are they coming from. Is it in Canada? Is it in Australia and all that? So I can choose to include country. So I look for country column right here in the field. Then I check country. So the moment I check country, you can see it brings it down here straight away. Okay, I can equally say that maybe at what point in time or at what year do I have this kind of profits in a particular location, in this case, country, and what age brackets is giving me that. So it is not fixed. It is what you desire to know out of the data that will determine what kind of column you select here to be displayed on your left on the pivot table. So if I go ahead to say, okay, let me know the year do I have. Yep, there's a column called year. So I can pick the year column here. The moment I pick it, it's showing me the summary of the year too. So I think I have basic information that I need now. It can be more than it, but at least this is basic enough for us to try. Okay. I can now go ahead and say, okay, I have the age bracket breakdown. I have the time is gone, 10 minutes. I have another call in 10 minutes time. So sorry. I have the profit. Let me remove the year because the year is not giving me anything too spectacular. So I can unselect year. Then if you want to collapse this, you can just click on this negative sign right here beside the age bracket. So it will collapse that because we broke down the age bracket into countries this way. So 99. So if by the time you had 32, 13, 2, 4, 47, and 1, that's what gives 99. That's just a breakdown. So, but I can go ahead and collapse it that, okay, I just want to see the 8 brackets. Just want to see the 8 brackets. So that way. Then I have country, right? Yes, country is there, but where the country was showing before is this way. So it may not be too easy for us to make sense out of that country breakdown. So let me do some tweaking around here. So since I have country, I want that country to be well spelled out because it's just giving me a summary of each of the country under the age breakdown. So I can say where is country in this field? Okay, country is here. Country is dropped in the horizontal um, chamber here, so which is the row. So I can pick country, just drag it this way, and I want to drop it in columns so that countries can be listed as columns, and probably I can have a better view of what the data is telling me. So I can drop country down there. You can see the table has changed already just by moving around some of the elements in the pivot table. If I return it, it goes back to the initial table, but I want something more well broken down. I drop it in columns from rows, then all countries forms a columns of their own, as you can just see here. So I can see clearly now that, okay, there are some countries, there are some age brackets that are not even featuring in some country. For instance, France, there is no age 35 to 64. That is an insight I have to pick. Okay, how come people in age 35 to 64 do not buy anything from France? What exactly could be happening to those kind of age bracket in that country that makes them not to be buying this kind of product? Are there other substitute product that they are already buying, or they are not even buying this kind of product at all? What sort of hardware do we want to do to start catching the attention of those people? Those are the kind of insights data naturally gives you, and it already begins from what we are deriving from pivot table. So you look straight away on the table again, you see that, okay, some countries are listed: Canada, France, Germany, US, UK. US again, can you see? We have US, 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 US. What could be happening? No country is expected to be written more than one. So why do I have United States and also United Kingdom twice? Then something must be happening. I need to check back the data, then go back to the country column, as I can see here. So what I can suspect could have happened is that those countries are written differently. Maybe there are some spaces in between. You remember we did this in one of the sessions while we are trying to talk about data cleaning. And that is why it's always good to clean your data before you analyze. This is an example of what data can do when they are not clean before analysis. So on a normal note, I shouldn't have countries being represented more than one. United States is United States. Why am I having it repeated 2 or 3 times across this table? So it means that the way those countries were entered right in the raw data, there are some discrepancies in them. Some have spaces in between them, and that's exactly what could have happened. Because we didn't clean this data before we started using it to practice for pivot table, that is what is bringing up this. So I can quickly check. Let me put my filter here and just say, come here and give me filter on that column. Then I go to country and I check. I can see United States written twice right here. So it means that there are some discrepancies in the way those stuffs are entered. Okay, all I need to do is remember what we did the last time when we want to deal with things like this. It's part of data cleaning process. So I create a new column to the right of the column that I want to deal with. In this case, the column is high. So I create an empty column right here. What I want to do is to clean this column. So I go ahead to say equal to trim this column for me, trim it such that all of them are uniform. They are written in a uniform way. There is no space before the beginning. There is no space in between in the middle. There is no space after. So that is what we encourage uniformity. So I'll pick this guy, then I'll close my bracket and click enter. So I know this one is clean. Then I will repeat this instruction for the entire column, and that has been done. So having done that, I copy the entire column again, Control C. Then I come back to this guy. This is the place I need it. I say Control Shift, arrow down to select that column. Then I right click on that column to paste value. So I'm pasting value, everything I have in column J where I did the sample of the cleaning. It is a formula there. I don't want formula to be in this data set. So I have copied it and I pasted it as value at the original column. Then I come back to this guy, which is column J. Just check your column I doesn't have any formula. I can see no formula. Just check the formula bar. You see that no formula. It is this guy that has formula that I use to do the practice. So I can remove it. It has finished its work. That's gone. Now I have it correct here now. So I expect my pivot table to come normal, having cleaned that. So I should not have more than each of the country repeating itself more than once. So here is the pivot table. Let's check through. I have United States here. I still have it here again. I still have it here again. So what could have happened? Pivot table, please note this very well. Pivot table only use original data that you initially called from. Whatever changes you are doing to the original data does not reflect immediately on pivot table. You have to consciously come back to the pivot table and refresh pivot table itself. That refreshing instruction you are passing to pivot table is that pivot table go back to the original now and pick the current state of things in that original file. Disregard what you have before now. Go back and refresh. If everything is the same, no problem. Let it be the same. But if anything has changed from the original file, then it has to change with you too. So I have only changed the original file. I've only worked on the original file. I haven't done anything to pivot table. That's why pivot table is still having what it used to have. So what do I do now? I just come here, I right click on it, and just right click on the pivot table this way, then I click on refresh. So as soon as I click on refresh, I expect pivot table itself to get refreshed, and all of those double representation I expected to have gone off. So what do I have? I have some changes, but some are still repeating itself. So I have United Kingdom, I have United Kingdom twice. United States was 3 before, it's now 2. Okay, let's see what happens here again. Country open. So it's corrected here on the original file. So we have United Kingdom, United States. Select all again. Okay. Refresh pivot table again. Or better still, I can refresh it in another way. This way. Then refresh. So I still have one United States. I have 2 United States, 1 and 2. I have 1, 2 United Kingdom. Okay. So maybe there is 1 or 2 things in between both that is not reconciling here, but that is how to ensure the pivot table represents what the original file is doing. So what else can you do from here? You can easily figure out a few things. I can also call out what I need. For instance, if I want to have a better view of this, I want to put this in a chart. Sorry, it's almost time. So I can pick any chart. For a table like this, the best chart we normally use is a column bar chart. So I can pick a column bar chart that way. Then I click on OK. The chart is brought out for me. This is just to show some stuff that is going on right in the data there. Then you can walk through all this. You can walk through all these charts slightly on the right and left. So I can go ahead to just say, okay, I want to make some corrections here. Do I want to have title on the chart? No, I don't want title. I want the chart to be as clean as possible. Do I want this grid line? This vertical line you are seeing is what we call grid line. So I can just go ahead and remove grid line so that I can become a bit neater. Okay, do I want to see legend? There's no point legend taking my space there. I can uncheck legend right here too. What else do I need to clean off in that place? Okay, I only have axis, so that axis is fine for me. Then if I need to remove that one too, I can just remove it. So you can equally come here and do format chart such that you can increase the size and the length of the chart for it to be a bit more visible depending on what you need to achieve. But that's how to bring out a chart against whatever table, which will show the arrangement of all the constituent elements inside the pivot table itself, and it will be showing directly on the chart. I need to move now to the next meeting. Hello, is there any question? Hello? Any question? Okay. Sorry, I won't be able to go beyond this moment for today as I have another planned call to join. But we'll take it up from here next session by next week. So you can go through the discussion. If there is need for any clarification, you can note it down against next meeting. Thank you for your time as always. We'll meet again next Sunday, same time for next episode of Discovery for People Managers, familiarizing yourself with data and building data skills as expected. Thank you all for your time. Have a wonderful week ahead. See you.